addiction, Dr. Brenda Schaefer, I believe, wrote the first book on love addiction, and she wrote several volumes of it, several editions of it. And then Pia Melody has written about, is it love or is it addiction? There's been a lot of people, I say a lot, there's been several people that have written books about love and sex addiction, and particularly love addiction. Now, people in the mental health field that don't really work with addicts deny that, that love and sex is an addiction. And they call it a process, or they call it mental illness. But it doesn't show up in our diagnostic manual as love addiction, but it is a process addiction. It affects the same part, the pleasure part of the brain, as drugs and alcohol and food, you name the addiction, and it affects that pleasure part of the brain. And so if you're going to, if you need to work on love addiction, make sure you go to someone who understands. I'll tell you, in today's time, there's a lot of good therapists out there that have really gotten themselves educated beyond their degree on addictions, and they will treat you and can treat you for love addiction. But make sure you ask the right questions, because otherwise they will discount it, or some. So that is just sort of a disclaimer before we start. And you know, people who are love addicts live in a chaotic world. Do y'all believe that? I mean, it is chaotic. They're fearful of being alone, and they're fearful of being rejected, and it keeps them in that mind. And they're always looking for that special someone that can fill up that hole in the soul. It's more common that a love addict can be a man or a woman. What we see here and pretty much across the board, usually there's kind of more women that are love addicts than men, but it can affect both. And also, it doesn't always have to be a romantic relationship. You know, if you're a love addict, you can be, can have that addiction or that obsession with a parent, with a child, with a good friend. I know that I was absolutely addicted to my mother. I became my mother's mother at a young age, and I worshiped the ground that my mother walked on. And that went on until I was 30 years old. When we moved from Odessa to Abilene, which is a normal about a 2.5 hour drive, it took us 7 hours to get here because I had to keep stopping at convenience stores to pay telephone and call my mother. And then that first year that we were here, my husband finally put a note by our telephone and laid the telephone bill out there and laid some stamps and paper and pen, and he said, please write, stop calling. And so I was obsessed with my mother. So, you know, we get hung up that love addiction is just in a love relationship, which it certainly is. But we get set up for it in childhood, really from any form of trauma. But the best to explain it in what I've seen over and over in working with people, and Pia Melody has explained it really well, and I've trained with Pia and worked with Pia quite a bit. And so it's like a love addict she is looking for love and usually looks for it in all the wrong places, or he does. And, you know, anybody, now for a sex addict, anybody will do. But for a love addict, oh, they're looking for that special someone. A love addict lives a fantasy life. And I don't care who they were to pick, that person would never fulfill their fantasy. They would never live up to their fantasy. And really how it gets set up is let's say a little girl is, and those that have been to Shades, you've seen us do this lecture, but a little girl that was raised in maybe a home where there was alcoholism, and the father's the alcoholic. And, so the father is focused on the drug, alcohol, going outside the home to drink, being gone, and the mother is focused on the father to get him to stop drinking, chasing him, going into bars. Anyway, so what happens is that there's not a lot of eyes for the children. And particularly we're talking about this one little girl that her dad, his focus was alcoholism and alcohol. It could be work addiction. You put it, fill in the blank. It could be work addiction is a really good way to avoid your children, to not have a healthy relationship with your children. So this little girl grew up with a longing to have a connection with her father. In the eating disorder field, we call that father hunger. They're just longing for that.
Hungry for her father's dick.
Hello? Okay, so we're looking for that. I mean, people with eating disorders, a lot of times we call it father hunger because we're having that longing for someone. And, for the anorexics, they don't eat. For the compulsive overeater, we overeat. It's anything to either not feel or, to push the feelings down. So this little girl was raised up by an absent father. And but she had this big heart and she just wanted to be loved. Just love me, love me, love me. And she started throughout her life, like she had this umbilical cord attached to her, and she went out through her life trying to find someone to attach that umbilical cord to. And really what she was looking for was a man to fix her. And, a love addict can go anywhere, a church, AA meeting, you name it, where there's a group of people, and a love addict will look over the group and to see if that special one is there at that business meeting or that church gathering. They're always on the lookout for that special someone. And so what happens is a lot of times the love addict will approach, let's say it is a woman, they will approach, let's say they go to open AA meetings, mainly because there's men there. So they go to open AA meetings and they see this newcomer there. And they go up and introduce themselves to this good-looking man. Let's say this good-looking man is a sex addict. Let's say that he's so this little girl grew up with that father hunger, and she has this big heart, and she's just looking for a man. She just has this fantasy. She's going to find this perfect man, and she will find a man and approach him. And, it could be at church, it could be anywhere, introduces herself. And a lot of times who she chooses is someone, and she doesn't know this. It's all on a subconscious level. They do not know this. But invariably, a love addict will choose someone that is an avoidance addict. And a lot of times they may be a sex addict, but they're an avoidance addict. They can, for whatever reason, love addicts choose someone that's not available. They're either married or they are gay, and she thinks, well, I could just love him to change him. He just has not had a loving woman. There's always a challenge with, they pick someone that is not available. And that's, who they go toward is an avoidance addict. And what we do, we choose partners to give us what we got in childhood or didn't get. So Pia calls this being addicted to the back walking away. Like she, woman or a man will approach someone and maybe even start dating, and she will think it is it's going to last forever. They've been together 3 days and she's already planning the wedding, and in her mind she lives in that fantasy, you know, and, you know, a lot of times what an avoidance addict wants, whether it's a man or a woman, they will give sex when they want love. And so she chases the avoidance addict, and the avoidance addict will let her catch him every once in a while. And when he turns around and walks away from her, that's when the chase is on. That's when the sickness really kicks in for the love addict, because the love addict, that is what she's done all her life, is to try to find someone to love me, love me, love me. So she will chase after the avoidance addict, and like I said, every once in a while he'll turn around and give her a few crumbs. And she settles. She settles for a few crumbs. Now, they may marry, and they may be married 50 years, and she still settles for crumbs. And, you know, unless there is a change in both parties, in both people. I mean, one person cannot do the changing in a coupleship. What is essential is for both members of the coupleship to change. So let's say this guy was an alcoholic. Let's say he relapsed his alcoholism. So he went off to treatment, and he'd been in treatment before. They recommended a halfway house. They kept, you know, which is standard. And let's say he wound up staying in treatment for over a year out of town. And they wrote back and forth, and this treatment center also treated his sex addiction. And he got to see real clear where his sex addiction started. And a lot of times where sex addiction, particularly in men, it can be reversed with women, but sex addiction in men a lot of times starts with a mother that over-mothers, that engulfs the child, that engulfs that little boy and makes that little boy like her little man. And a lot of times, you know, maybe the little boy has laid in bed at night and experienced domestic violence. Maybe the parents fight at night. The little boy lays in bed and hears that fighting. And, you know, what he does, and little girls can do the same thing. He finds himself at a very early age, and he will start masturbating. So when there's discord outside his bedroom door and they're hollering and screaming and fighting and hitting each other, he will pleasure himself by masturbating and can even put himself to sleep. And that begins a habit. And in his adult life, that habit can turn into an addiction. Now, I'm not saying everybody that masturbates has a sex addiction, so don't go out and say that I said that. You know, it's pretty much a normal, natural thing for human beings to do. It's just don't get addicted to it. But anyway, so what happens is the love addict finds someone that is an avoidance addict. That, you know, what that little boy does, he grows up. And I always say this about my dad. My dad loved sex, but he hated women. He had no respect for women. And a lot of your sex addicts, they have a hard time being with women. You know, a lot of them don't respect women, you know, because women will let them use them. And so, you know, we get both of these, and so both have to go back to their childhood. That's where this stuff starts. I don't care what therapist you go to, if they want you to just talk about, you know, you do have to start out to talk about present day, what problems, what got you there, but after a while, everything goes back to the childhood. And, you know, you don't have to live there forever, but you must go back and do the childhood work, heal that woundedness with that child, and then, you know, grow yourself up. It is about, we have to grow ourselves up, but we must do our work. We must be gentle with ourselves when we're doing the work. And if we're in a coupleship, we must be gentle with our partner as they do their work, because it's going to take time. It's not going to be no quick fixes. And but what I tell people in a coupleship, if there is any romance left at all, stay with the one that brought you to the dance. Stay with that person, unless it is a physical or, really abusive relationship. Stay there and learn about yourself in that relationship. Don't study the other one. That's their, that's what they need. You change within that coupleship. You do your work. And when you begin to love yourself, you can look over there and see the good in that other person. You will remember why you chose him or her in the first place. Oh, that's the quality that I like. That's the quality that I don't see anymore. But you're going to have to get healthy enough within yourself to where and take your eyes off of your partner long enough for you to heal, and then hopefully your partner will heal. And we see some of the healthiest coupleships in the world where both partners are in a 12-step program and have done their own work. What I encourage people to do is stay until you can stay and become different. Once you can be there, you may not like the situation. He might not have changed one bit. She might not have changed, but you've changed. And I remember the very day that I went up to my husband, and I'd been in Al-Anon for years, and he was still drinking. And I went up to my husband one day, he was the man that was silent. He was the man that was the avoidant. He could be a textbook avoidant. He avoided anything that might be emotional, unless he was drinking. And that's how he was when we were dating. And I thought that was my knight in shining armor, but you know the rest of that story. But I remember in my recovery, I started looking through different eyes, and I saw him through different eyes. And I went up to him one day, and I put my arms around him, and he was kind of flinched because I used to beat him up when he'd come in drunk, and I'm not proud of that. But I put my arms around him, and I said, honey, I know that you're sick, and I just love you. I love you anyway. That was the beginning of his healing. Now, did I heal him? Absolutely not. But I got out of his way, got off of his back, and I went on about my life, and I got better. I didn't divorce him. I stayed in the marriage, and I'm glad I did today, because we had, out of 51 years, we had 20 good years of marriage. And, we celebrated our 30th anniversary by having having another ceremony, and that was more meaningful than the first. But anyway, let's get back to love addiction. And I want to give you a few, there are so many signs and symptoms of love addiction. But one of the things a love addict does, they confuse love with obsession and neediness. There is nothing more needy than a love addict. They can't get enough of anything. It's give me, give me, give me. And invariably they choose people that cannot give them anything. They don't have it to give. And then they stay confused all the time, and they confuse love with obsession. Also, a love addict has little or no boundaries. They'll let anyone just come in. They'll talk to anyone. They will carry on a conversation with anyone, and particularly if it could be a love object, could come into a relationship. Number 3, intense fear of being alone. That fear of being alone, or fear of being rejected or abandoned. Adult children of alcoholics of any sort that come out of any form of dysfunction have that fear of abandonment. And that is one of the biggest things for love addicts, is fear that you are going, someone's going to leave them and one more time reject them and abandon them. Another thing is, this little girl, when she grew up, as much as she wanted to have a relationship when that love avoidant turns around and goes toward the love addict, it scares the love addict to death, and they become the avoidant because both parties have a fear of intimacy. And intimacy is into me, I see. It is about intimacy is when we can be okay with ourselves, we can be okay with another person. But that the real fear is intimacy. And, you know, for the love addict, it is all about the chase for the love addict. And so, and they have that, I mean, that strong need to be close to someone, but when that someone gets close to them, they get scared and they run and they close off. And so you have two avoidants in the same relationship. Despite the pain, what happens is a relationship may bring the love addict the belief that just being with someone can change them, you know, whether they get anything out of it or not. Just know what they think, that if they can just be with another person, they will be all right. And it can change their loneliness. It can change who they are. And it never works. It never works. It's got to come from inside. We've got to be okay on the inside before we can go into a relationship, because otherwise we're going in there to get something. And then we find other people who are needy and they are in there to get something. But when you have two strong people standing tall, autonomous with the God of their understanding, when they can live alone and pretty much take care of themselves, but would like to have a partner, when they can be alone and take care of all of their own needs, guess what? They're ready to be in a coupleship. And sickness seeks its own level. What happens as a love addict begins to recover, all of those men that she went toward before, she has no interest in them. When we get healthy, we seek healthier people to be with. Sickness seeks its own level, so does health seek its own level. I've already done all of that. This obsession, and they become obsessed. When you have a love addict that's really into love addiction, they can hardly do anything else. They can hardly function. They may go to work, but they're going to spend their boss's time on that computer trying to contact their, love object, or they're going to be looking for someone on those dating sites, or they're going to be on the phone calling, checking up on him or her, wondering where she is, why isn't she answering the phone. That obsession and that preoccupation, they're totally obsessed with the other person. And then they have, I'm laughing because years ago I had every one of these, and some of them, these I came up with on my own because this is how I lived my life. So, becomes upset, well, I said that. And another thing, a love addict is always anxious that their partner is going to leave. They just know that they're going to leave. And they almost push him out the door for fear that they're going to leave. And they just want to get it over with. I know you're going to leave, just go on. And it just confuses the hell out of the person that they're with, because it's that come close, go away, come close, go away. And another thing is number 8, can't stop thinking about the person. That's that mental obsession. I don't care where you are, your focus is on the other person. Just focused on the other person. Number 9, your partner is the only person, place, or thing that makes you happy, or that makes you feel alive, or that makes you feel complete. Now, with a real hardcore love addict, any man will do. And for a real hardcore sex addict, anybody will do. And they usually team up together. But a real hardcore love addict will go from man to man to man to man, because they wear people completely out, because they suck. A love addict can suck the other person dry. And if you've picked someone that is even halfway healthy, most of the time they will not stay with a love addict. It's like, get this leash away from me. I mean, it's like they can't stand it if they have a little bit of health on board, you know. But if they are as sick as a love addict, they will stay in the sickness until one of them gets healthy enough to pull out, go for help, and a lot of times the other one follows them. That's what the end of this story is about, is hope. Hope for recovery and hope for both of them to get help. And so, you know, we've already talked about this, but it can not be talked about enough, is when you are a love addict and you're seeking love from someone else, whether your children, your parents, a good friend, when you're seeking love from somewhere else, there is something in that childhood that's not finished, some unfinished business. And those of us that, and next week I want to talk about second stage recovery and how important it is to continue to do our work, because a lot of this stuff doesn't come up in early sobriety. It comes up later on in sobriety. And so, you know, if you're continuing in a pattern of bad relationships, if you're the love addict and you choose someone that leaves you or can't be there for you, or not affectionate and you want affection, all of that, go back to your therapist, come to treatment, come to a 4-day, do something, come in and do a piece of work around your childhood. You know, it's not to blame our parents or to blame the childhood. There's just something missing that we need to look at, and it's from the childhood. We've already talked about this. A love addict is really, they will give sex many times when they are wanting love, because they're with someone a lot of times that are sex addicts. You know, because they don't know how to show intimacy. A sex addict doesn't. They don't know how to show love, affection, attention, healthy touch. They don't know how to show that because they wasn't given it in their childhood. And so what happens is the love addict will give sex just to feel close to someone. And number 12 is... for a love addict is the inability to maintain an intimate relationship once the newness has worn off. You know, what a love addict likes is that early stage of a relationship. There's even a body chemical, a brain chemical, I cannot think of the name of it now, that is activated when you're in an early stage. Some of these therapists on here might remember the name, but it is a chemical in our brain that is activated when we're in an early love relationship. And it just feels so good, and oh, that's all we can think about, and we just love them, want to be with them all the time, and they want to be with us all the time. And, you know, after a while, what true love is, it really just settles down, and true love is having you know, healthy affection that doesn't always lead to sex. It has companionship. It has a give and take relationship. It has a calmness about it. It has commitment with it from both parties. But a love addict wants that fantasy and that thrill that you get from an early relationship. And so they will get tired of one they have, and they'll go find, and sometimes will have affairs just to renew that feeling of that excitement of a thrill of a new relationship. Oh, he's just, I mean, and he'll be Mr. Everything, or she will be, you know, the grandest thing that's ever happened. And so another thing is for the love addict. The love addict spends a lot of time and care and gives attention and caretaking to the other person. And a love addict can find needy people across the room. They pick out people who really need a little help, you know. And when I chose my husband, I knew he needed a lot of help. He wore breeches that were real short. He'd wear white socks, and those white socks would show. And he'd wear his shirt tail out. I mean, I didn't like his haircut. I mean, and I knew, and I was a teenager, but in the back of my mind, I thought, well, as soon as we get married, I can change it. I can change all that. Actually, I changed it before we got married, and we didn't even date very long. That's what a love addict does. They don't accept the person just like they are. They already have a list of things that they're going to change. So, you know, a love addict, so they will feel better about the person, about themselves. This is a sick deal, folks. But anyway, another thing that is a red flag about a love addict, if you want to know if you're a love addict, a good love addict can kind of see the end of a relationship coming, and they've already got another one in the wings. They might have one foot in one relationship and the other one and another one, because they're not going to be alone. They have that fear of being alone. And this is where they can get in so much trouble. And if it is a woman that has affairs and then the husband finds out, there's something so sick about it, but that's what she likes, is those men fighting over her. That was what my blessed by mother's sickness was about. Wanted to be fought over. And anyway, so after a while, a love addict, like I said, the newness wears off. And maybe she's stuck with him because she married him. She's got a house full of kids, but she's sick of him because he's not that knight in shining armor. He snores, he has bad breath, doesn't put, you know, the toilet paper up like she wants it, you know, turned the right way. He just can't do anything right. So she starts looking outside the marriage. And the same with him. He will. So, but a love addict will, but she will not leave one relationship without having one, at least one that she knows she can go toward. They have to be with someone. That is a real good indicator, like I said a while ago, that you know that you're ready for a relationship. Is when you can be with yourself and you enjoy your own company. Boredom is saying, I can't stand myself. I can't stand being in my own company. And so when you're healthy, you're not bored. You enjoy your own company. So, and I want to say it one more time because I've written it down 3 times, is work on any unresolved childhood issues, because that's where it starts. So I'll give you a little hint of other things that you might do. If you're not in a committed relationship and you recognize that you are a love addict, by no means do not get in a relationship. Give yourself time, you know, I'd say at least 6 months, maybe a year, to work with your therapist, maybe even go to treatment. Love addiction is serious. You know, the bottom line, every addiction has a bottom line. You know, alcoholism, if you don't stop drinking, you're going to die from alcoholism. Eating disorders, you're going to die from overeating or undereating or binging and purging. I mean, that is the bottom line. Process addictions sometimes are kind of a little different. You know, a work addict can wind up losing everything that they have. You know, their work addiction, I won't go into that, but what happens with a love addict, bottom line, what happens with a love addiction is if it's not treated and if it's not looked at, severe love addiction turns to homicide and suicide. There's a woman still in prison in California. I can't remember her name. I thought about it while I was getting dressed, and I forgot it. But they made a movie out of her life. And, you know, she met her husband. She came from a bad alcoholic home, all of that. Anyway, she met her husband, and this is what another thing that love addicts are good at. He didn't have a lot of inspiration about what he wanted to do in his life, but she saw his potential. She knew that he was smart and he could do anything. So he went off and he got a doctor's degree. And she pushed him and she helped him every way in the world. They had kids, she took care of the house, the kids, blah, blah, blah. He got a doctor's degree. And then it was right when people could really sue doctors and make lots of money. Anyway, she decided that he needed to go and be a lawyer and get his law degree so he could be lawyers for all these doctors that were being sued. And he did, and he became one of the most famous lawyers for helping doctors being sued. And, you know, she stayed at home, she took care of the kids. Long story short, he fell in love with his young secretary. He asked for a divorce. It was horrendous. He moved her out of the family home and moved his new love object into the family home. Long story short, this woman, his wife, went in one day, early one morning. She still had a key to the old house. Early one morning, she went in, walked up the stairs, opened the bedroom door, and shot both of them. Now, she didn't kill herself, but she shot by that time they had married, her ex-husband and his new wife, shot them both. Every time she comes up for parole, in order to get parole, you've got to admit that you that you are, what's the word? That you're sorry for what you've done, that you have some, what is the word? Anyway, I had it earlier. Admit that what she did and admit that it was wrong. She will not admit it. She will not admit it. She said, nope, I had every right to kill both of them. And she'll probably spend the rest of her life in prison. I don't know. But this is severe love addiction. Now, you know, in some ways we can say, you know, she was justified. No one's ever justified in murdering someone. But that's how severe this love addiction can get. But the scenario usually happens, you can pick up a newspaper anytime in big, large cities where they have killed one partner and then kill themselves. You know, maybe the other one's having an affair and they kill them and then they'll kill. So that's that homicide or suicide. This is not just a little thing, you know, a little fantasy thing. Love addiction can get to be very, very, very sick, and it needs to be treated. It's not a passing fancy, and so seek help. Seek help. And then what I said, if you're not in a relationship, don't get in one for a year. You become different, and your picker will be different. You will pick someone healthier. Another thing, if you're in, and I've already said this, if you're in a relationship, stay in it and practice and, you know, and become different. And when you do that, you know, at the end of the year, you're going to know whether you want to stay with that person. You may love that person on a certain level, but maybe you don't want to be married to them. But give yourself time, both of you, time to heal. And a lot of times people leave prematurely. I see this in AA a lot. The partner, a lot of times it's a man, and the wife's alcoholic, and he's fed up with her alcoholism. She gets into AA. She's gone a lot. And the man will not go to Al-Anon. You couldn't pay him to go to Al-Anon. And what happens is he gets belligerent, he gets angry, He gets angry at her time spent in AA, gets jealous, and what happens many times is he will divorce her. And then what he does, he'll go off and seek out another one, and every time he'll seek out someone, either an alcoholic or someone that has an eating disorder, someone that he needs to take care of. We see it over and over. So both parties need to get their own help. And that's why I love to see people get into AA and Al-Anon. And I've already said that in order to have a healthy relationship, both of you absolutely must do your own work. It's not a parent-child relationship. But I do want to say, if you've got some children and you're particularly obsessed with one child, for whatever reason, you might want to look at that. You know, maybe that child had been sick in their infanthood or whatever, that you're overly attached to one child. You might want to look at that, because that could be a case of love addiction. And if you're doing that, you're doing a very big injustice to that child. And that child will grow up to pretty much hate you. And so if you're over-loving, you know, whether you're a man and you have daughters, if you're over-loving your children, back off. Your job as a parent is to teach them everything you know to teach them, where they can go out in the real world and live. That's your job. And you can love them, hold them close when they're infants, you know, and begin by age 3, 2, and 3, begin to let them go, let them do everything that they can do for themselves. Anytime that we do anything for someone that they're capable of doing for themselves, whether it's a toddler trying to learn to put their shoes on, or a grown adult that cannot fix them a plate of food to eat, if you take care of those physical needs for them, you're enabling that person to be a crippled. And that's what love addicts do. They think it's their job to take care of everyone. And, you know, that goes into codependency. So I have just, like I said, sometimes I go to preaching. But love people loosely. Love them loosely. And then let them go. And you've heard this, if it's meant to be, if you let somebody go, if it's meant to be, they'll find their way back to you and maybe healthier. All right, that's what I have. I've got some recovering love addicts on this screen, and if you don't speak up, I'm going to call on you. Who wants to talk first?